Have you ever read a text and felt like there was more to it than meets the eye? Deconstruction can help us dig deeper and uncover hidden meanings and assumptions. In this video lesson, we will explore the key concepts and principles of deconstruction theory, know its main proponents, and consider some of its strengths and weaknesses. We will also examine some examples of how deconstruction has been applied in a different context and consider its relevance and utility in contemporary discourse. By the end of this lesson, we will learn about the theory and the practice of deconstruction and see how it can reach our understanding of text and the world around us. Deconstruction originated in France in the late 1960s, when structuralism and existentialism were still intellectually active. Generally, structuralism is the prelude to deconstruction. Deconstruction theory emerged as a response to structuralism, a philosophical movement that emphasizes the importance of structural relationships in understanding the world. Structuralism asserts that the meaning of any given phenomenon is determined by its place in a larger system or structure, and that it is possible to analyze and understand this system by breaking it down into its constituent parts. The deconstruction theory argues that this approach to understanding the world is flawed, as it ignores the complexity and fluidity of meaning and the ways in which meaning is shaped by context, language, and power. Proponents of deconstruction proposed that, rather than seeking to understand the world through fixed structures, we should approach text and ideas with an open mind, recognizing that meaning is constantly shifting and open to interpretation. Deconstruction was both created and profoundly influenced by French philosopher Jacques Derrida. In a fundamental sense, deconstruction is associated with certain techniques for reading text developed by Jacques Derrida, Paul Deman, and other thinkers. The following are the main proponents of deconstruction. Jacques Derrida. Jacques Derrida was one of the well-known 20th century philosophers. He was the founder of deconstruction and was responsible for making the study of deconstruction popular. He was born in 1930 in Algeria into a Jewish family. In 1976, he published 3 books: Writing and Difference, Speech and Phenomena, and Of Grammatology. Derrida was diagnosed with cancer in 2003 and subsequently died the following year. According to Derrida, all texts, whether literary, philosophical, or scientific, are constructed out of language, and language is inherently unstable and open to multiple interpretations. This means that there are no fixed or stable meanings in a text, and that meanings is constantly shifting and subject to interpretation. J. Hillis Miller. J. Hillis Miller is an American literary critic and a professor emeritus at the University of California. He is known for his contributions to the field of literary theory, particularly as a proponent of deconstruction. Miller, as a student of Derrida, was primarily responsible for bringing deconstruction into the literary realm. According to Miller, deconstruction is not a dismantling of the structure of a text, but a demonstration that it has already dismantled itself. Its apparently solid ground is no rock but thin air. A significant criticism of deconstruction is that it makes saying anything about literature impossible because it constantly undermines established or seemingly apparent interpretations. Miller says, no, actually, literature is already broken down. Deconstruction is merely the only critical theory that realizes that. Ferdinand de Saussure. Saussure was a semiotic theorist, someone who studies the relationship between words or signifiers and the thing being spoken about, the signified. Much of his theory about the arbitrary correlation between words and what they represent served as a springboard for deconstruction. While de Saussure did not explicitly use the term deconstruction in his work, his ideas have influenced the development of deconstructionist movement in literary theory and philosophy. De Saussure's concept of sign consisting of the signifier or the physical sound or form of the word and the signified or the concept it represents, and his emphasis on the arbitrary nature of language have been essential influences on deconstructionist thought. Now, what is deconstruction? Deconstruction cannot be defined in particular terms. Even Jacques Derrida, who developed this concept, did not and could not define it in exact terms. But instead of defining it, we can discuss the various aspects of deconstruction. We can see how Derrida used deconstruction and how deconstruction is used as a literary theory. Now, what does deconstruction involve? Deconstruction is the combination of a prefix and a word, de plus construction. But it is not, as you can see, destruction. Deconstruction does involve breaking down a text, an idea, or the conventional obviousness of structures. And it involves themes that are contradictions that emerge in its meaning. It is sort of dismantling the text and then bringing it together. Any idea and concepts will be broken down to the deconstructor's ideology and subjectivity. In fact, the main points of deconstruction are that the person, the critic, the reader, his psyche, his objectivity, and his personality modifies the text meaning. A text, an idea, a concept, or a belief might seem to have a particularly unified meaning on a surface. A deconstructive perspective helps us to see how a text may have not one, but many meanings, many conflicting or contradicting opposite meanings that challenge each other. A text may not have fixed meaning. The meaning cannot be fixed because it changes from context to context, person to person. It has no final meaning. The idea of a unified, singular final meaning is a myth in deconstruction. For example, read this to yourself. Which word did you emphasize? Depending on the word you emphasized, the meaning of the text changes. You can read it the following way. I never said she stole my money. 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 Do you see what I'm getting out here? How am I supposed to know what it means when I have no idea what words you were trying to put inflection on? What words you were trying to emphasize? How am I supposed to know what these mean? That could be almost impossible, right? The fundamentals of deconstruction. Number 1. No true meaning due to ambiguity of language. Meaning is based on a combination of intent and context. You can't find true meaning due to the ambiguity of meaning and the constant change of language. Deconstruction looks at the ambiguities in signifiers and states that a single signifier can have many different signified meaning. A signifier is the word itself. The signified is the idea or thing the word refers to. A sign is the link between the signifier to what is signified. For example, define the word red. What does this word mean to you? Without using a dictionary, of course. Can you describe this word to me? Perhaps one of you will say that it represents danger, or that red is a color of love. Others will say red is anger, violence, or seduction. In this exercise, all I say is red, and every single one of you define it entirely different. How can I expect you to know what I, the author, mean when we can't even agree on one simple word? And yet I am expecting you to know what I mean when I write 1,000 words? I mean, how are you supposed to do that? We can't even agree on one word. So how am I supposed to find meaning out of that? A deconstructionist would say that's the problem, because words are so fluid. You need to get away from the idea of finding meaning. Instead, you need to get more of this idea of looking at intent and context. The theory of deconstruction also emphasizes binary oppositions, or two concepts that are the antithesis of each other. This is how we learn what exists or doesn't, by looking at the exact opposite of that. We only know what hot is because we felt cold. For example, presence with absence, life, death, white, black, man, women, outside, inside. Deconstructionist points out the nuance of words, pointing out how difficult it is to narrow down a specific meaning of something or anything when every single word has a multitude, almost endless amount of interpretations and context and meaning. How to deconstruct a text. Step 1. Pick the thing that you will deconstruct. Here is my example, Cinderella. Step 2. Determine what the text says. Use formalism or structuralism and figure out the poem's intended meaning. And if I am looking at Cinderella, it seems to me that Cinderella, should I say, is the ultimate good girl, that she is sweet, kind, obedient, and innocent. And these are all traits that the story seems to champion. And her evil stepmother is none of those things, so she is evil, and the text doesn't like her, and that she is not somebody to emulate. Step 3. Let's look at what the binary opposites are here. If we go back to step 2, it was said that Cinderella is the ultimate good girl and her stepmother is evil. So it seems to me that the opposite is good versus evil. Now, which one is considered championing or desirable? Well, the text seems to be saying that good is better than evil. Step 4. Analyze why the text claims one opposite is superior to the other. Example: we value Cinderella over her stepmother because of her innocence. We value her kindness and innocence over the qualities her stepmother possesses. Why do we value Cinderella? Because of her goodness. We see these values as superior to the evil stepmother. Step 5. Derive a new meaning by flipping the binaries around. Look at this. Cinderella disobeys her stepmother. Her stepmother says, "You can go to the ball, just finish your chores." That's a reasonable request. What does Cinderella do? She whines and cries in the garden. She's not very obedient here. Her fairy godmother comes in when Cinderella is at her most disobedient self. When Cinderella is doing her chores and being obedient, her fairy godmother does not come in. Her fairy godmother does nothing. It was when Cinderella was disobedient that the fairy godmother stepped in. So, I thought the text said that if you're good and obedient, good things will come to you. Yet, good things only came to Cinderella when she was disobedient. The text does not seem to be saying what I thought it was saying or what it seems to think it was saying. That's how deconstruction works. It seeks to expose the inherent ambiguities, contradictions, and tensions present in the text and challenge the traditional hierarchies and binary oppositions that shape the understanding of the text. Look at the Lion King, for example. Lion King suggests that Simba is the good guy and that Scar is evil. Yet Scar is the one that unified the hyenas and the lions. Scar is the one who brought peace to the land. When Mufasa and Simba were in rule, the hyenas vanished. They were ostracized. So I thought that Simba and Mufasa were good guys, but they were all about segregation, and I thought in our culture it was a bad thing. So I am confused. Are we trying to say that segregation is a good thing? Is that what Lion King is suggesting? That doesn't seem like a good message to tell our children. The relevance of deconstruction in literary criticism. Deconstruction as a literary theory focuses on exposing cultural biases in old text, whether a passage in a popular book or a television ad's flashing script. Readers engage in deconstruction analyze words and sentences to identify inherent biases and call into question the commonplace interpretation of the text. While this may sound presumptuous or cynical on the front end, deconstruction isn't about destroying meaning. Instead, it's about undermining ingrained assumptions to view things in a new light. Deconstruction, as applied in the criticism of literature, designates a theory and practice of reading which questions and claims to subvert or undermine the assumption that the system of language provides grounds that are adequate to establish the boundaries, the coherence, or unity, and the determinate meaning of a literary text. Typically, a deconstructive reading sets out to show that conflicting forces within the text itself serve to dissipate the seeming definiteness of its structure and meanings into an indefinite array of incompatible and undecidable possibilities. Strengths and weaknesses of deconstruction. One of the strengths of deconstruction is its ability to challenge dominant interpretations and reveal hidden or suppressed meanings in text. By carefully analyzing the language and structure of a text, deconstructions can bring to light alternative perspectives and meanings that may have been overlooked or marginalized. These can be especially useful in contexts where traditional interpretations have been used to justify oppressive or exclusionary practices. Deconstruction gives a very close reading to help the reader and critic better understand they make certain choices during the reading which influence their opinions and reactions to the text. Deconstruction also calls attention to the inherent stability of language. It helps people realize that there is no obvious link between words and meaning. People shouldn't just know what a poem means because we don't share a common history and mind. Do you see the same shapes in clouds that I see, that everyone else would automatically see? Another strength of deconstruction is it brings what is normally marginalized to the forefront. Sometimes this doesn't quite work the way it should, but sometimes it brings to light a new and invariably unique perspective that would be missed if we kept ignoring it in the favor of the popular reading. The following are the weaknesses of deconstruction. Deconstruction undermines the assumed ability of people to communicate and understand each other effectively. The study of pragmatics concerns how people understand one another in conversation. Deconstruction says we assume too much when we think everyone else means the same thing. Another weakness of deconstruction is that it is way too hard. A weakness of deconstruction is that it can be very difficult to understand and apply. Deconstruction often involves complex and abstract concepts and can be challenging to grasp for those who are not familiar with the theory. Additionally, some critics argue that deconstruction can be overly critical and dismissive of traditional interpretations and that it can lead to a nihilistic view of meaning and interpretations. Another weakness of deconstruction is that, though it does not analyze language very closely, the results are rather open-minded. What's the point of simply upping the strength of magnification if no real answer comes out of it? In the following section of this video, we will examine the road not taken by Robert Frost in the lens of deconstruction approach. Deconstruction involves analyzing a text in order to expose the internal contradictions and underlying assumptions that shape its meaning. Here is a sample deconstruction of the poem, The Road Not Taken. Two roads diverged in a yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both, and be one traveler. Long I stood, and looked down one as far as I could, to where it bent in the undergrowth. At first glance, the poem appears to be a simple description of a choice made by the speaker. The speaker encounters two roads and must choose one to take. However, a deconstructive reading reveals that the poem is not as straightforward as it seems. One assumption that this poem relies on is that the road not taken is somehow different or better than the one that was chosen. This is suggested by the phrase, "And sorry I could not travel both and be one traveler." The speaker seems to regret not being able to explore both roads, as if one of them might have led to a better outcome. However, this assumption is challenged by the final lines of the poem. I shall be telling this with a sigh, somewhere ages and ages hence. Two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. Here, the speaker suggests that the road not taken was less traveled by, implying that it was less desirable or less well-known. However, this interpretation is complicated by the lines, and that has made all the difference, which suggests that the road less traveled actually led to a better outcome. This contradiction reveals that the poem is not simply about the choice between two roads, but also about the way in which we think about and interpret choices and their outcomes. A deconstructive reading of this poem might also consider the implication of the lines, "I looked down as far as I could to where it bent in the undergrowth." This suggests that the speaker was unable to see where either road led, and that the choice between them was ultimately uncertain. This undermines the assumption that the road not taken was somehow superior, that highlights the uncertainty and contingency of all choices. Overall, a deconstructive reading of The Road Not Taken reveals that the poem is not simply a description of a choice, but also a reflection on the way we think about and interpret choices and their outcomes. It challenges the assumption that the road not taken was somehow superior and exposes the uncertainty and contingency of all choices. In conclusion, deconstruction is a powerful tool for challenging traditional interpretations and uncovering hidden meanings in a text, but it is important to approach it with an open mind and be aware of its limitations. That's all for deconstruction. I hope you all learned something today. This has been your reporter, Lexter Brian M. Dusaran, Mind English 1, saying thank you for listening and goodbye.